Okay, in this lecture, we're going to talk about the role that the media plays and some of the effects that the media has had on many of the phenomena that we've been talking about. So, again, just to talk about what the media is often regarded as a social institution. It's one of the ways that a society gets its needs met, in this case, communication on a mass level. So, when we're talking about the media, we're largely talking about, again, many people think about it just in terms of television, which is a very important medium of the media. But of course, we could be talking about any communication that's meant to reach a number of people. So this could be things like magazines, um, books to a large degree, movies, the internet itself is a very important part of the media. When we usually think of the media, we think about, again, the broadcasting of news or information, right? The mass sharing of information among a large group of people. Really important effect of the media is the degree to which it serves to a large degree, shape the way a culture thinks and sometimes therefore behaves. There's a great quote from the Columbia Journalism Review that says, "The press has the power to shape how people think about what's important, in effect, to shape reality." So, again, if we're seeing it communicated on a mass level, like the media, that's what then becomes usually the focus of our attention. So, again, when we think about social problems and how does something become a social problem, we usually think about social movement organizations seeking to promote social change. One of the main things they'll do sometimes is try to access the media. Um, and again, what are some of the other ways? We talk about politics. We talk about people, and we'll get into that, as you can see behind me, in just a couple of seconds. Again, people use the media in order to, shape public opinion about what they think is important when it comes to, how the country should be run or what the policies should be. The media itself has its own agenda. We can actually track it kind of over time how this has changed. Again, I'm being very broad and overgeneralistic here, but we could say that in the past, the media was regarded as kind of a social service, right? It was something that was regarded as or a public service. This idea of it's our duty to report the news and be fair and unbiased and neutral. Whereas we definitely see today, the media has become much more condensed into larger and larger conglomerations, and that these conglomerations are often owned outright by large corporations. And then the agenda becomes what's good for the corporation. So again, I'm not painting an awful picture of journalists. Many of them are quite aware of this struggle that they face, and are subject to and a lot of times they push back and offer resistance. But we definitely know that many, especially if you think about broadcasting, the large news networks are owned by corporations, and therefore then do not want people reporting on news that would cast a bad light on the corporation. All right. So again, news agencies have their own agendas when it comes to things like social problems. So if anyone will remember from the early 2000s, what was called the Occupy Wall Street movement, which was basically an attempt at a social movement organization to raise awareness about corporate misbehaviors and wealth inequality in the United States. It was generally not favorably looked upon by the media. One would think, oh, all these people camping out and demonstrations, we should really look into this. And media response to what at the time was an attempt at a social movement organization was very much muted by the idea that corporations said this is not good for us to portray this way. We definitely know, of course, that also news organizations rely hardly on commercial revenue, revenue produced by advertising and commercials. So, if a news organization wants to remain competitive with other news organizations, they have to bring in advertising, and the advertising is, of course, at the whim of corporations largely. Okay. Um, so we definitely know that there's a lot of pressure, and sometimes it comes down to this kind of idea behind, what does the media feel more free to portray? We'll talk about some of the reasons for this in a future module. The difference between big government and big business. Okay, big government often talked about again by certain characteristics. The federal government, where the people are elected, through elections by citizens. They serve specific terms of office. Largely, we would say, or at least in theory, that they should be concerned with social welfare, making the country better, bigger, stronger, for the purposes of then gaining more votes for re-election. And usually, when we think about big government, we're thinking about the creation of legislation, or in other words, regulation, the rules by which society operates. And a lot of times in business, it's those rules. So we think about things like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, or zoning on a local level. This idea of where businesses can and can't do things and how they should behave. When we think about big business, again, a large part of the opposite. Who runs big businesses? CEOs, who are people who are subject to basically positions of being placed in those positions by the corporations themselves, with largely unlimited terms. A CEO can remain a CEO as long as that CEO is considered to be effective, by the corporation itself. But in other words, CEO is not going to get voted out. One of the goals of big business is to increase profits, right, for the company itself and also for its shareholders. There's no pressure whatsoever to quote unquote do what's right for the society. It's to do what's right for the corporation. And also, when we think about big business, we're talking about a focus on deregulation, right? Less rules. So again, we'll see this, when the EPA, for example, says, okay, you can't dump, this type of material into, rivers or streams. It'll be big business who says, well, what are we supposed to do with it? We need to produce this product and it's made with these chemicals. What are we going to do with these chemicals? And we'll push to have regulations softened or lifted so that they can go about the process of making things to sell to people to create profit, right? So, again, not everything's as cut and dry as I'm making it, and clearly I'm oversimplifying. But if we think about this kind of role that these things play, and if big business is in fact, and we can make a justified case for it, largely the bigger influence on the media than is big government, then we can say that we're going to get a skewed version of this argument between big government and big business. So we can talk about this idea of what we sometimes then refer to, again, when we talk about American corporate culture, we tend to think about it as our own society because the word American is in it, right? But we definitely know that American corporate culture has spread largely around the globe, right? Again, being the largest economy in the world, we definitely know that our products have spread around the world. The ways, and with that goes culture and values, right? So, you can see where America has spread and become very much a dominant culture around the globe. One of the examples I give of this all the time is how can you tell who is a business person around the world, a person engaged in, like I said, big business or probably working for a corporation? My guess is because that person's wearing what we definitely define as a business suit, right? Does that mean that those suits are being worn all around the world throughout history? No, of course not. It's an adaptation of largely an American style of dress. Another example would be, why is it that you can go pretty much to any place in the world, any country around the world, and find a McDonald's, right? Is it because it's the best food that human beings are able to produce? I think we all know the answer to that, right? But it is a symbol, largely. Again, we're back to that idea of symbolic interactionism, the golden arches, right? You go anywhere around the world and you're feeling homesick, you'll probably look up, see the McDonald's sign and say, there we go, now I feel better. That ethnocentric kind of drive toward our own culture. But for many other cultures around the world, this is considered to be somewhat invasive, right? This idea of why do we have these McDonald's, in our country? country? Is our food not good? Is it, but it's this idea of, kind of this homogenization. When we talk about homogeny, right, or something becoming homogenous, becoming the same. And we definitely see that in global culture. Clearly, that's good for the American economy and for American tourists who like going around the world and feeling like they're at home. But again, when we talk specific about social problems, we definitely see many of the social problems, especially those related to, like I said, big business, spreading around the world. So, to quote, or to, I guess, to summarize this module, we can definitely say that critical constructionism is again, the synthesis of conflict theory and symbolic interactionism that seeks to examine how social problems are formed and why. We can answer two questions: why this and not that, and why